This is Cherry here. I am the founder at Claribase, and we've started this nonprofit 2.0 podcast to really bring you lots of experts in the nonprofit space who can help us learn and develop as leaders. Because even after we've worked with so many nonprofit clients as on their systems, we still want to learn together and develop our nonprofits and businesses together. And today I am so excited to have Ronesha Jackson. So, Ronesha, I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yes, of course. So I was working in as a nonprofit consultant with a consulting agency, and it was just really interesting to see the sector from that perspective. So I had spent my career working inside of nonprofits and executive leadership and development, in all of those different types of roles. But I had never had the opportunity to kind of experience the nonprofit sector as a consultant coming in and kind of seeing it from that outside view. And so that experience is what really prompted me to kind of see some of the challenges that were very much like themes, throughout the sector. I would work with a consulting client and I would think, oh, although this is has its nuances, there's something very similar about this situation as the last three nonprofits, right, that I worked with. And so when I decided to start my own training and development agency, I knew that it was really important for me to be able to work with the people behind the mission, right? When you put people first, especially in the nonprofit sector, everything else tends to kind of come together better, right? Because your people are the ones doing your direct services, but they're also the ones behind the scenes making everything happen. And so this people first leadership model is something that's very central to the way that I work with nonprofits.
That's awesome. And what you said about seeing the trends across the last three nonprofits that you worked with, I see that so much in my work as well, because even though no two nonprofits are the same, and even when we're working with the same functions, there are still differences to how everyone does their work. But so often we're able to bring the experience that we've had working with all of our nonprofit clients into the next project to just advise them and help them see things that they hadn't even think of yet. And it's really that context knowledge and experience that really helps with even when we're building systems.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I will add that I also think that, nonprofit leaders oftentimes feel like I'm the only one going through this, or my nonprofit is the only one going through this. So to be able to say that there's a shared experience here is sometimes enough to get people to be unstuck about it and say, okay, other people are also dealing with this. So let's try to move forward. Let's try to figure it out rather than being stuck in this space where it's like, it's only us, this is a problem only we are having. And so is it fixable? Right.
Yeah. And how do you get people out of that mindset? Do you, like, on the first call, just remind them in the first 5 minutes that they're not alone and there are other executive directors out there with the same problem?
I often take the approach of doing a lot of listening when I first meet a nonprofit leader, just because oftentimes leaders don't have someone who's just listening, right? There's on the other end of conversations, there's either someone that you need to give instructions to, or someone who needs something from you, or you need something from them, right? And so there's this opportunity as someone coming in and wanting to really help leaders and teams for me to take time to like actually just listen, right? And to be able to reflect back to those individuals what I'm hearing, right? So this is what I'm hearing from you. And sometimes even that reflecting back tends to kind of help to shift mindset a little bit in the very beginning. And then the way that I work with nonprofits is very much about the experience. So we always have goals. There's something we're trying to get to in the end of our work together. But for me, the experience of the way that we work together with your boards, with your teams, those conversations that we're having, if I'm facilitating something or if we're doing strategic planning, those are the things that are going to help to really shift mindset because it's like, I experienced this. Now I know this, or now I know that other people feel this way. So the way that I'm thinking about it starts to change over time. So that's my approach to not necessarily trying to verbally say, you need to change your mindset, but to know that that's part of the work that we're doing in the way that we engage with one another over time.
Yeah. Sounds like therapy as well.
Yes, a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. And what do you usually help people with? What are the issues that they come to you for?
Primarily when leaders come to me, they might not always know what solution they're looking for, but they know what the problem is. And so that goes back to that listening of just hearing people say, "My board and I are not meeting the goals that we want to meet together," or "I feel like we're not on the same page," or "I have this leadership team, but what I'm saying and what they're doing, it's not connecting," or "My team is not working well together with one another," or these two departments are having a challenge around this one thing. And a lot of times it's also about staff experience, right? So a lot of times people will come to me and say, "Hey, we did this staff survey. This is what we heard. Now, what do we do about it? We want to have a solution. How do we fix this?" And so there's a myriad of challenges that people come to me with, but primarily it's that their mission is suffering in some ways because of people, right? Because of the way that people are working together. Lack of clarity is also often one thing that's happening is, as a leader, I'm clear on this, but other people are not clear on what it is. So communication, those types of things.
Right, and really getting to that alignment. So how do you work with people? I'm sure there are lots of conversations that you help facilitate. What are your strategies to getting to that alignment piece, whether it's with the executive director and the board or the executive director and their team or multiple teams?
So there are different pathways. I definitely do one-on-one executive coaching as well as team coaching. Sometimes there is a need to kind of unwrap some things individually first before we can start working on teamwork. We also do trainings. So there's in some situations where the challenge is really just everyone doesn't have a shared understanding of what something means, right? So we can often say, "Hey, we want to collaborate well." And that's great, but what does that mean in the context of this space, right? So being able to marry training and facilitation together, give some baseline information, and then give opportunities for people to kind of surface what that means in their context and to be able to develop some next steps. And the third pathway, which usually works in collaborations with the leadership team and the board, and then eventually the staff and the community as well, is strategic planning. So that is a process where we come in and we do a lot of listening to your staff, to your board, to your community. And then we have a process where we work together to understand what people are saying and then creating a pathway forward where everyone works together to kind of move in that direction.
And in those meetings, let's say the team is like not really clear on what that mission is, or there's some misalignment in communication. What kind of questions do you ask to bridge those gaps? And how do you get the conversation started? Because I imagine a lot of people can start this work themselves and start to align and start to try to just start having these conversations with their team. How does someone even start with
Yes.
this?
Yes, I think it really begins with knowing and understanding that there are different levels of awareness, right? So sometimes people come to me and they say, "Hey, this is the situation." And right away, they're able to kind of name what's happening and even name the solution, which is great. Okay. And then I can help you there. But there are always going to be people on any team who have a different level of awareness. So maybe I know that something's not working well, but I don't really know what it is, right? I can't name it, I can't verbalize, I don't really have the language to say this is not working. I just know when I'm working on a project, I don't really know what the benchmarks are, what the outcomes need to be, all of those things. And so they don't really have language to name what that really is. For people who want to kind of start this on their own, that is great. And I think that you should because it makes cost you less money, right? But it makes my job much easier if you have taken the time to kind of
Yeah.
understand the different levels of awareness and being able to kind of pull themes from that. Oftentimes, because your staff members can't really call it what it is, you as a leader may say, "Well, it's not a problem." No one is verbalizing it to me in a way that says that it's a problem. So you asked about questions. I think, the first question is more so about experiences in the workplace, not how can we help you do your job better, not how can, what tools do you need? All of those things are important, but first you need to understand what people are experiencing in the way that they are working day in and day out. What experiences are you having as an individual and making it okay for people to be able to tell you about experiences that don't necessarily align with what you want to hear. So sometimes people will never come to you and say, hey, this is what I'm experiencing, because there's not that psychological safety there. They don't feel like it's okay for them to tell you something that doesn't align with what you want. And so you will never ever get to the root of the problem if it's not safe for people to truly be honest about what their experiences are.
Yeah, and that was actually going to be my next question because I have a friend where they're doing these anonymous surveys on how the team is feeling and how things are wrong, but they just have a really toxic leader at the top. So the team can't even voice that directly. Everyone's trying to say it in different ways in that anonymous survey. And the person who is actually working with the senior leadership is the consultant. And of course, they talk to senior leadership, but they're just trying to piece together why the team is not working well. Have you run into those situations?
Yes. Yes, I have run into that. I, as someone external, I am bought into the outcomes that you want, right? If you come to me as a leader and you say, "Hey, I really want my mission to thrive," and I see that there's something happening within the team that is blocking that ability for us to serve our communities well and to thrive as an organization. And if I get those surveys and I can definitely pull out and I can see there's themes here, there's something here, even if it's something that people are not specifically saying. Anyone with enough experience working with teams can surface there's something here that we need to unravel more. And as someone external, there's no consequence to me saying to another executive leader that, hey, the problem is within leadership, right? So before we can move forward, or before I can really help you get the outcomes that you're looking for, there is some work that we have to do on the leadership level. And it really helps if there are specific examples, because again, we talk about that level of awareness where executive leaders are often very, very busy. They're trying to get through the day. They're trying to get a lot of things done. And sometimes they are not aware, but that's not an excuse. It's not an excuse to, not work well with other people. And that is something that I am a proponent of, where intent and impact are not the same. And just because you are intending to do something well, if you're not, if the impact is negative, then we have to talk about that and figure out a plan before we can actually move forward.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And it's not something that, and I can't even imagine a situation where there are multiple people in leadership and you don't necessarily want to tell your colleague that they're the one causing problems and no one is going to bubble that up from the team. So everyone's just feeling a little on edge in the organization. Just having someone externally be able to communicate that could be a really like helpful thing so there's no confrontation within the team. When they recognize there's a problem, how do you go about making it clear what that problem is and how do you like pull out those threads of I'm seeing patterns here. How do you help people clarify what that issue is?
Yeah. Once we've taken the time and we're really able to kind of assess what may be going on underneath the surface, and we can call those things what they are, I like to communicate them different ways. So, when we're doing that debrief or when I'm coming to present to you, what I've heard, we talk about that verbally, but then I also do it again in a way that you can read, that you can go back to later in time, because people engage differently. And so the way that I communicate something with you here versus when you've had time to kind of sit with it, go back and read it, go back and understand it, all of those things are an important part. So I think that there should always be multiple ways of how you are communicating something with, the people that you are working with. And just in addition to that, I think it's also important to recognize that there will always be people who are just not ready to engage with the fact that it has to do with the way that they show up as individuals, right? That happens. And I personally have had an experience where I worked for a leader who was not ready, despite all of the very clear communication, verbally, written, all of the ways, surveys, percentages, all of the things that you really need to say, okay, this is where we are. That person just was not ready. And so her solution was just to, end the relationship with people who didn't necessarily want to align with the way that she was doing things. And in nonprofits, there's supposed to be this level of, ownership from your nonprofit boards, this level of checks and balances. And despite how often we really try to do our best to make sure that happens, there are situations where even the boards are not equipped to figure out how to handle situations like this. Someone who loves the nonprofit sector, and I truly, truly believe that our communities would not be healthy if we did not have nonprofits. I never want to say that nonprofit executives are not good people, because I think at their core they are. They're working for hard missions, but it doesn't mean that they can't make mistakes or that they're always right or that there shouldn't be opportunities for them to correct the way that they choose to show up as leaders.
So interesting because you might get brought in, but then after that survey stage, maybe you realize they're not quite ready. What do you do in those situations? Let's just say there's multiple people on the team. One person is really not ready to make a change, but the other two are. Like, what happens then?
Yeah. I have had that happen. I try to, in the very beginning, when people reach out to me to help, I try to assess that the best way possible, because it is really, we like to get it right, at Evolve. We like to be able to say we got people the outcomes they're looking for. And to be able to really do that, you kind of need to assess, like, can I really help this client do what they need to do? So I will say that we mitigate a little bit of that, because there are times when a client will come to us, they'll say, this is a problem. We talk through it and it's kind of clear. You can ask questions. Has the leadership done any of their own things or whatever? And sometimes there's like, no, they're not into coaching, or they've done coaching before, or, is the leadership open to having, a small group dialogue, right? Bringing these three leaders together and kind of surfacing these topics. And sometimes they say no, right? And so in that case, I say we probably are not the best person for you, to help you, because we want to help you get to where it is that you want to be. And so that's a really important part of it. But I have had clients where it's gotten to that part and, I just say, this is where we are. If we continue down this path, we're very unlikely to get to the outcomes that you want, right? You said when you came to me that this is what you wanted. And if we continue to do this without first addressing this, we likely will not get there. And so it's now on them to kind of decide, do they want to keep trekking in that direction, or are they willing to invest in taking time to pause the work that we're doing and figuring out what needs to get figured out so that you can make progress in that other area?
I see. And the readiness piece is so interesting. And I see that as well in my own business where some clients are just not ready. They don't understand what it takes to build a system. And a lot of that I hear are like parallels in the work that we do, because if the leadership isn't even willing to all together sit down and get on call with you, and they think there are 50 other things more important than their team culture and communication and how we can steer towards the same direction, then there's no success in working on that internally with just part of the team or working on it with an external consultant. So I think even for the people who are listening, it's important to recognize like how ready this team is to explore help even by themselves or help with external parties coming in and doing some coaching. When people come together and they do the work, what does good communication look like? Do you set them up with some tools that they could follow over time so that they can maintain the changes that they've worked with you on?
Yes, yes. So always, 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 we are thinking about how to sustain whatever work we have done, right? And that's also a conversation that we kind of have at the end, because, there is this trend of like, oh, we did this training. We do this training every year. And it's like, okay, you did the training, but like, how do you sustain that, right? What does this look like in practice? And so tools are definitely important. I think that there should always be a shared place where there's communication happening, for your team. Or if I have a question about, hey, what does this look like? Or how do I do this? Or that I should be able to go and just find out. Like, I don't have to wait and talk and verbalize or, have a conversation with someone about it. there should be a shared place of communication. There should be opportunity for me to maybe go back to conversations that we previously had to kind of think about it and consider those things. So I do think that, and I know that tools are an important part of sustaining whatever work we do over the long term. And sometimes clients already are using some type of internal tool, and it's like, okay, how can we integrate into that because you're already using that and it's part of the culture already. And then sometimes it does look like bringing in something new, but ultimately the most important part is accountability, right? Anytime that you are trying something new, that you are trying to shift culture work, or you are like, hey, we are kind of shifting the way we communicate about things. The biggest part of that is accountability, right? So you have to be willing as a team to either hold one another accountable, or you need to be willing to figure out who can be responsible for ensuring that there's a level of accountability within the workplace. That to
Mhm.
me is the biggest thing, because you can have tools that are amazing, great tools, and that can really be supportive to the work that you do. But if, especially in the beginning, no one's holding you accountable to ensuring that you're using tools, you're putting the information there, you're checking there, it's very hard to sustain the work that you do.
And how do you ensure that accountability is there?
Yeah. So honestly, for that part, I set it up. I make sure I do have some clients who are like, hey, we want you around for this first 6 months of that. And so accountability can look like, me having the ability to be able to go in and ensure that tools are being used regularly. And when they're not, having the ability to kind of be able to ping you or come to a staff meeting and say, hey, we're at 50% usage and we're really trying to get up to 85%, problem solving with them. What is the challenge? What's the issue? So that we can get to that point. But the best way to sustain it is for teams to be able to take on that responsibility of holding one another accountable. So I always try to help them implement something that they don't need someone externally to hold them accountable to, right? You have to be positioned and willing and able to hold yourselves accountable to that, because that's what's sustainable, right? When budgets are cut, when things are shifting, when priorities change, you want to be able to continue to sustain that. So you have invested in this tool, and how can we ensure that your workflows and the staffing that you have, that there's not gaps in accountability, right? Because even in the way that you structure your job descriptions, there should be, who do I hold accountable? Who's holding me accountable? Those things should be clear, right? And a lot of times they're not. So you can work at a place and you can be like, okay, I'm not doing this for 6 months, and people don't realize until that 6 month mark that you haven't been tracking data, right? That's not truly accountability, because there should be a system internally of like how we're holding each other accountable for the work that needs to be done, not even on a supervisory role, but because we all work together, it's symbiotic, right? I need what you do and you need what I do. And so there should be a process for accountability in the way that we work together.
When we're talking about that accountability piece and using the systems and making sure data is entered appropriately, do you find that people don't do it because they don't understand why it's necessary? Or is it just they're too busy? How do you motivate a person to use the systems? Or do you just say, well, actually, your systems are bad and that's the problem?
It could be a lot of different things. I think the biggest
Mhm.
thing is the system has to match the staff, right? If you are a 7 person staff, the system that you use and the level that you use that system is probably going to be very different than a 70 person staff or a 700 person staff, right? Because the way that your capacity is different, right? And what's important is often the same throughout, but the level of importance is different, right? So as you grow as an organization, if I'm a 7 person team, data is definitely important, right? We need to know who we're serving, how we're serving them, the outcomes that they're getting. But when I move up to being a 70 person team, that data gets definitely more granular, and it should, right? Because we are now a bigger team. Our mission is growing. We're serving people more. And we should be able to get more granular in understanding exactly what was happening with that person when they came in. And when they finish our program or made progress, we should have a lot more data about what that looks like versus on a 7 person team, right? Very different. And so to your point, or to your question around deciding about what types of tools to use, I think it's really important to consider not just the size of the team, but the capacity of the team, the level of training and understanding that you provide to team members. I have had team members say, use this, like, I came here, we use this tool. At my old job, we use this other tool. But when I came here, they just gave me a manual on how to use it. And I kind of had to figure it out as I went. Okay, so is the issue that people don't want to use the tool or that they don't have the capacity to use the tool? Or is the issue that they've never really been truly trained on how to use this, right? And so sometimes people will kind of shy away from engaging with something because they don't feel confident engaging in it. And so even just being able to say yearly, we do a baseline understanding of how we use this tool, the different features, the most important parts of it. I mean, I even worked with a leader a few days ago and we were in their CRM and I was doing something and she's like, wait a minute, hold on, go back to that. And she's like, oh my goodness, I did not know that I could do that, right? I have manually been doing this. And so sometimes at the end of the week, I won't even do what I'm supposed to do in here because it takes me so long. She's like, but I didn't even know that that was a feature, right? And so now with AI and how technology is like rapidly changing, it is so important that if you're using a tool in the workspace that you are regularly helping people to have a baseline understanding, but to understand like, okay, this is how you can input data. This is how you can make updates. This is how you can let us know what's happening. Even if you've done it before, a one-time training is not enough when it comes to tools that you want people to engage with regularly.
Nice. That's a really great call out, like having a baseline level understanding and training every year for what they should be doing.
So it sounds simple, and people tell me, like, I'll say, oh, well, what do you think about doing this? Or what would it be like if you did XYZ? And they're like, okay, easier said than done. And I'm like, I get it because I have been there, right? I've been a nonprofit executive. I've been inside of roles where it's like, okay, this new initiative is coming up, or I need everybody to do this. And it sounds really easy to say, let's do a baseline training every year. And sometimes it can be challenging, right? But the reality is, as a nonprofit leader, we always need to be assessing priorities. And those things kind of have to be a priority. Even if it's not you doing the training, you bringing someone else in, or even if you have someone on staff who is a tech whiz and they know it, have that person come and do 2 30-minute trainings, right? It's just about how you consider the importance of things and how you consider, how can we make this work for us?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And even for us, every 6 months or so, we want to just see how our clients are using their systems. And it's just good upkeep because when we build systems, we hand it off to the client, they can make their own adjustments. So sometimes their adjustments are good, and other times their adjustments don't make sense. And if we don't have that ongoing dialogue, we can't help them with how they can do their work more efficiently.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And to what you're saying, like there are sometimes just gaps in understanding. So I love that you all are doing that because you could look at something and you could be like, there's an easier way for these two things to work together. A lot of times nonprofit leaders are really good at seeing the outcomes. And so if they can say to you, Cherry, this is what I need the system to do, you can really guide them on like, it can definitely do that. This is the easiest way to do it, or this is the most simple way, or this is the most effective way to do it. And it makes it so much easier to be able to allow the systems to evolve with you over time.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And all systems do because, like you just said, the 7-person team needs a very different system than a 70-person team, who needs a very different system for a 700-person team. So we will often have these really long-term relationships with our clients where we help them make those like ongoing changes, and we don't talk to them every day. Sometimes every 6 months or so they come back with a request and we're like, yeah, that makes sense as the team grows.
Yes, that's awesome. That's what we need. We need more relationships like that, right? That will grow with you. And that's where Evolve came from, the name of my consultant agency, because the world is changing, right? And nonprofit leaders, if they want their organizations to really be able to make a difference in the community, we have to evolve, right? We have to evolve with the landscape around us, but also with the people that we serve, right? Their needs are different as the world changes. And if we want to have a thriving organization, if we want to continue to make an impact, then as leaders, we have to evolve.
Yeah, absolutely. And where can people find you?
They can find me at my website, evolvetcf.com, training, coaching, facilitation. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and they can always reach out to me. I'm so open to just learning and hearing and connecting with nonprofit leaders. So if there's a question, send me a message on LinkedIn. I'm always willing to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll share all those links along with the podcast once it goes out. And once again, I'm Cherry Young. If you want to have some systems that do evolve with your nonprofit as well, you can reach out to us at clarybase.com. And I'm on LinkedIn as well.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much, Terry. You're amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for taking the time to meet with us today.
Yes, my absolute pleasure.